Hi, I'm Adrienne Terizzi from the Amherst League of Women Voters, welcoming you to tonight's live Election Night Coverage 2018, sponsored by the League and our longtime collaborators here at Amherst Media. The Amherst chapter is one of 45 in the state and was among the earliest to organize. We'll be celebrating our 80th year of our founding and our mission of bringing nonpartisan voter education and information to the Amherst community. We extend our deep appreciation to Amherst Media and its staff, without whom tonight would not have been possible, and we thank you for joining us tonight. Now, for the next 90 minutes, Stan Rosenberg, former State Senate President and longtime League member, will host some very interesting and relevant discussions with our guests on national, statewide, and local ballot questions, and the local issues facing our town as we change from select board town meeting to a council form of government. As soon as the polls close after 8 p.m., our League runners and tabulators will be reporting the results of Amherst's historic very first election for new town council, and we'll find out who voters chose as the 13 members to represent us. So stay here on Channel 17. We've got it all covered. I know you'll enjoy the program.
Good evening, and welcome to our election night coverage here at Amherst Media, sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters. I'm going to give you the lay of the land. We'll be together for roughly an hour and a half. I hope you will stay with us for as much of the coverage as possible. We're going to be focusing on our local elections, starting with our hopefully our new soon-to-be elected State Representative Mindy Domb. We'll then move on to a conversation with Professor Ray LaRaja, and Ray is a political science professor at UMass, and we're going to be giving you some hints about how to look at and think about the national results, because it's going to be a very long night, and most of the results on the national level are going to come well after this show is over. But Ray is going to give us some hints about thinking about how to watch for the rest of the evening. Many are sitting on the edges of their seats waiting to see the results of our federal elections. And then we're going to hear from our town manager and outgoing select board chair, and we'll be talking about the town council. And then we'll have a representative from the League of Women Voters who will be here to talk about both the local non-binding referendum questions and also the 3 binding questions that are on the state ballot. And we'll be interrupting as we go through the evening as results come in. We're focused principally on our local elections, and by the end of this show, we're going to know who our new town council members are, and hopefully we'll know the results of the ballot questions as well. But our main focus, and we'll go off the air shortly after we have all of the returns for the town council, and then we're assuming that many of you will be switching over to network television to follow the rest of the election results at both the state and federal levels. And again, hopefully Ray LaRaja's coaching will help us all think about what we should be watching for in the next few hours to determine what's going to be happening at the national level. But with me now is going to be our first guest, and that's Mindy Domb. And Mindy is a candidate for state representative, and the polls will be closing very shortly. And we're in the final half hour of the voting, actually a little bit less than a half hour now. And since there was no other candidate on the ballot, and we didn't hear about a write-in campaign, it's very likely that Mindy is going to be the state representative-elect before this evening. And so we're really grateful that you were willing to take the time to come over and sit with us for a few minutes to reflect on the campaign, and as you move forward to preparing to assume office. Again, we don't want to assume anything, because until every vote is counted,
that's right,
the decision is not made. But again, it's pretty likely that by the end of this evening, you will be the state representative-elect. So let's take just a minute first and do the quick history, because I think that's important. Mm-hmm. So let's go back 50 years. 50 years, Mindy. And in 1968, John Olver, a chemistry professor at UMass Amherst, was elected to the House of Representatives. 4 years later, he said it's up or out. And I hope you decide that it won't be up or out after 4 years. But he recognized at that point that it was up or out, and he took on an incumbent Republican state senator, John Barris from Goshen, and sure enough, by just a very slim margin, he was the first Democrat ever to be elected to the state Senate from this Senate district, and was an Amherst resident. I followed him 4 years. I'm sorry, Jim Collins followed him next, and Jim served for, oh boy, probably 12 or 14, maybe 16 years, and became chair of the Education Committee. And he went off to become Chancellor of the Board of Higher Education. And following that experience, he practiced law for a while, and then he went to the court, and he became a distinguished jurist in the juvenile court. And he still sits on the court now. Again, a very distinguished career that he had. I followed Jim when John Olver went to Congress. I had the opportunity then to move from the House into the Senate. I served about 5 years because the Senate seat opened, and I moved. And then I stayed there for a good long time. And then came Ellen Story, as you know, and she followed me in the House, and she was in, I think, 18 years?
More, I think 24, 25.
24 years, 25 years, okay. You know that more recent history than I. Very good. And then Solomon Goldstein Rose took the seat and decided not to seek re-election in the end. And so you are about to, we believe, become the next state representative. And so for 50 years, this seat has been in the hands of someone from Amherst. Okay. And currently the district, correct me if I'm wrong, is Amherst, Pelham, and half of Granby.
Yep, precinct one.
Precinct one of Granby. Very good. So tell us what the experience was of running for office.
Oh, I adored running for office. I loved meeting not only people that I knew and benefiting from their expertise, but especially meeting a whole lot of new friends and new people and new ideas and new concerns. And today I had the opportunity to sort of revisit some of those folks. One person in particular I'd like to talk about, he's a pharmacist in Granby at the Center Pharmacy. And when I was first collecting signatures in Granby, I met him, and he was just very generous with his time. He talked to me a little bit about reimbursement rates for pharmaceuticals from Mass Health, and really sort of informed me not only as to how his reimbursement worked, but also how his local pharmacy works as a real sort of community focus. And today I went and said hello to him again, and I've gone back there several times, and he gave me a flu shot. So it was sort of a real win-win for me.
Very good.
And so I was able to not only reconnect with him and thank him again, but get immunized against some version of the flu.
And remind me, is that Mr. Lalonde?
Yes, it is. It is Lee Lalonde.
Lee Lalonde, and his father was big in Democratic politics when I started in the House, and I stood in front of their store as well, gathering signatures. And on election night, they fed me spaghetti.
Oh my gosh, I'll have to go back for the spaghetti.
You'll have to arrange for that. Very good. So what was the most exhilarating part of running for state rep?
You know, in some ways it was really, we did a lot of house parties. We did about 25, 27 house parties. And in the house parties, people really sort of shared their concerns in a way that sometimes you don't get in campaign. And they also asked me questions that I would not necessarily get on a street corner. And so we were able to have some real conversations, which for me was quite exhilarating. That and the number of little girls that would come over to me in the campaign and want to shake my hand and thank me for running. Their moms sometimes would thank me, but I didn't really expect little kids to say thank you. And that was really sort of momentous for me. It's like a real responsibility then.
Yeah.
You know,
well, during the primary season, in talking with friends, I said, this is the year of the woman. And sure enough, if you look at what happened in this Senate district, The likely new senator is going to be the first woman in the history of this seat, Jo Comerford from Northampton.
Such a terrific person.
And the first person from Northampton in 100 years.
That's right.
Since Calvin Coolidge. And so that's interesting. And then you're going to be joined by Natalie Blais and by, help me here, there's
Dan Carey in
Dan
East Hampton.
Carey from East Hampton, and then Lindsay Sabadosa from Northampton, and Susanna Whips is from Athol, and Paul Mark from Peru, and he touches this district through Greenfield. But interestingly, so out of the 7 seats, 5 are going to be occupied by women.
I think the Valley essentially increased the percentage of women in the State House by about 1 to 2 percentage points this year.
That's fantastic.
And I had heard somebody say that there's one part, some people say that women are riding the wave, but really women are
they're creating the wave.
And that's a nice feeling.
That's terrific. That's terrific. What are you thinking about in terms of committee assignments that you'd like to pursue?
Well, higher education is my #1 priority for a committee assignment. You come from Amherst, I think it's like a no-brainer.
They see the rep from Amherst as the UMass person.
And I think we are.
Rightly so, yeah.
It's not only because UMass is physically located in the district, but a lot of residents are connected to UMass, either as employees or as students. So I think that is a #1 priority. I'm thinking about revenue, and I'm thinking about substance use and mental health. But the reality is I'll be happy wherever I am in a committee. I'll figure it's a new opportunity to learn information, but I am hoping that higher ed is one of the 3.
That's great. And how does your experience at the Survival Center fit into your thinking about how you'll be doing your job and what you bring to the job?
I think the people that I've met in the Survival Center and their experiences and their challenges is something that I will be bringing to every discussion that I have with folks. And that's already happened in talking to people around economic justice issues as well as climate justice issues. I sort of bring those experiences with me. I was able to speak at the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women hearing that happened in Turner's Falls about 2 weeks ago and talked about diaper need. And I'm hoping that I can bring that into the discussions and legislation. And so I think it's going to be a big part. I'm a little sad I can't do both jobs at the same time, but so I'll have to make sure that I keep those folks in their concerns.
Many people who serve in the legislature much closer to Boston do have a second job, but it's very difficult to do even any kind of part-time work from Western Mass, and especially if you hope to both represent your district well and pursue opportunities for leadership in Boston, you really have to be totally focused on the job. If you think about it, you're in the car 4 to 6 hours every time you go round
That's
trip.
Right.
And when I first started, it was about 4 hours. Now it's closer to 5.5 or 6 hours, depending on traffic. So the advantage that people closer to the State House have of not having all that travel time is enormous. So for Western Mass legislators, it's really important to really focus on the job and see it as a full-time job.
Well, I think that when I'm back in the district, I'll be spending time at the Survival Center and either volunteering or having some kind of office hours or open hours. Today, on Election Day, I was able to go and get a delicious lunch at the Amherst Survival Center, and that was fun because I was really sort of a day off, but I decided to come into the center, and it was great. The Survival Center is a place to get replenished, I think, and to be reminded about how great our community is and how generous we are to each other. So it's a good thing to do.
Good. Well, so since there are so many new legislators from this area, how are you folks thinking about your work together and your coordination and being able to have a different kind and maybe a more powerful presence?
It's such a great question because during the campaign, I think we all heard from constituents who were concerned with the loss of seniority in the district and how are we going to make up for it. And I think all of us are very aware that we need to really focus on our relationships primarily and then go out. And so all of us newbies are sort of already meeting with each other, already talking with each other, already sharing information. And then we're also sort of being embraced by the existing members of the delegation. And so we're having meetings with those folks too, including Rep. Tricia Farley-Bouvier from the Berkshires, who came and took all the women out for brunch. And so there was also this subgroup of women legislators. And I think we're all talking not only about our priorities and our wishes for committee assignments, but also how we can work together. And I have to say, I also think State Senator Joe Comerford is really playing a role in also not only meeting with the state reps, but also talking about how we can work together across houses. So I think that it'll be all right. I mean, you can't make up for the time in terms of when people retire, but I think the partnerships and the relationships are going to be very, very strong.
Great. Do you have a final word of inspiration that you want to share with our folks who are watching us this evening as you prepare to head off to celebration tonight?
Keep all of your public officials accountable and make sure we are transparent and that we provide you with opportunities to influence us.
Great. Well, thank you for spending some time with us this evening. I'm sure you were out all day holding signs, shaking hands, and encouraging people to vote. And we're going to look forward to your excellent representation.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Amherst Media will hope to see you in their studios many times.
Maybe I'll be interviewed by you on all those opportunities.
You never know.
I hope
you never
so.
know. But
it's
thank you
great
for being with us this evening.
Thanks, Stan.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
And so now to be changing set here, and we're going to have Ray LaRaja join us. But first, I think there are going to be a few messages that are going to be shared with you by Amherst Media.
Tonight's program is sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters, a voice for citizens and a force for change for 80 years in Amherst. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to all, ages 16 years and older. To learn more, please visit our website at www.lwvamherst.org.
Amherst Media's capital campaign is offering individuals, families, and organizations an opportunity to be a permanent fixture on our brick wall of supporters, which will be located in the reception area of our new facility. Your custom brick can have your name, your family, organization, or up to 3 lines of text, and larger sizes are available. Display your support for the ideals and service Amherst Media has provided for over 40 years. For information, options, and pricing, go to amherstmedia.org/bricks. Thank you.
Probability of the Senate and blah, blah, blah. We are now on live, and we have Ray LaRaja, Professor of Political Science at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And Ray's going to help us think a little bit about how to watch the shows that you'll be tuning into later to see what's happening at the national level. We hope you will stay with us until we have a clear picture of what's happening with our town council. But we know the evening is going to be a long one because polls close some parts of the country at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, although it's a reasonable hour where they are. So, Ray, tell us what we should be looking for. Help us understand what's going on here with the U.S. Senate, what's going on with the Congress. I'm sorry, the U.S. House of Representatives. They're both the Congress. And what should we be looking for tonight? What are the states which will give us some indication of what's trending?
Yeah, well, it is going to be a long night. There's a lot to go on. As your viewers probably know, the Senate and House are still controlled by the Republicans, and it's going to be a difficult task for the Democrats to take back the Senate precisely because they're defending so many seats throughout the country. So
roughly how many are they defending versus how many the Republicans are defending?
They're defending about 18 or so, 20 or so in tough races, and or 10 races are particularly tough. But the Republicans are not defending many at all, and that's just the luck of the draw.
Yeah,
as we
because
go.
a third of the seats come up every 2 years, and this time it's more Democratic seats that are up for grabs than Republican. In another election, it would be more Republican.
So in 2020, the Republicans are going to be in the reverse situation. The Democrats are going to be able to be more aggressive. But that said, they still have a chance.
Yep.
If we if they start running the table on some of these seats I'll be talking about.
Okay.
In the House, we see a different picture. The Democrats need to pick up 23 seats. And they're doing it in places where we see a switch in voters. These are the suburbs, and we see many voters in those suburbs deciding they don't want to vote for Trump and his candidates. And so we might see a lot of flips in those areas. That's the one I'd be looking at right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you have a guess of how many seats, based on your analysis, are likely to be picked up by the Democrats if there is a Democratic trend?
Right. I do see they need 23, and I think it's fairly likely they'll do that. Most pollsters say between 5 and 6 chance, 6 and 7 chance. Those are pretty good odds, although I know some viewers we said that back during the 2016 election about the Trump race, and there's always the odds that this can't happen. Most respected pollsters and my own analysis, I think the Democrats will pick up between 30 and possibly 40 seats, given the momentum.
So I asked that same question of 2 other local political observers, and I'm not going to mention their names because if they're wrong, I don't want them to be embarrassed, and if they're right, they're going to be embarrassed right now. They're going to kill me because I didn't use their names. But one of them said 35, and the other said 37.
Yeah.
So all 3 of you are in the same general range.
Ballpark.
Same ballpark. So what happens? So tell us about which states we should be watching this evening as we're tuning in on the major networks, as to trying to figure out if there is a trend in the Democratic direction. And remember, we're on a show for the League of Women Voters, which is nonpartisan. Right. So we are speaking in theory here. And yes, a lot of the pundits have told us that this flip is entirely possible. Yep. But now, which states should we be watching for the trend?
Right. Well, I want to just point out to your viewers that this election go 50 votes towards the Democrats, and the Democrats could actually not take back the House. So there's probabilities across the board. That said, there are a few races, 3 in particular I'll be looking at early on in the East Coast. One is the Virginia 7th. And this election, I want to also point out that one of the big differences of the election is there's a huge surge in women candidates in Congress. And I point that out not just for historical reasons, but the voters who are going to change this election are going to be women. Those are the most important voters, especially educated women, mostly in the suburbs. They are very engaged in this election. And the Virginia 7th is one area where we might see this happen. This is a district just outside of Richmond. It's a unique district. It was a district that Eric Cantor, who was the former majority leader of the House, lost in an unprecedented race to this fellow named David Bratt, a Tea Party candidate. He's still there, and now we have a candidate. Her name is Abigail Spanberger, and she is a former CIA operative. She's worked in government service. She's a first-time candidate, and her odds look really good. And not only because she's a good candidate, but she has huge enthusiasm in that district. So I would be looking there. It's a nice setup between a new women candidate and a Tea Party candidate. If we see the Democrats take back, that is good for the Democrats. Another race I'd be looking at is Kentucky's 6th District. Another Tea Party candidate, another woman, first-time candidate. Here we have Andy Barr, who's the sitting incumbent, versus a Marine fighter pilot whose name is Amy McGrath. This district was carried by 14 points by Trump. So it's a tough district. But if she takes that district, that is a very good sign for the Democrats in Kentucky that is so much in favor of Trump in the last election. And you see a pattern here. These are women, some of who've worked in government, who have this kind of profile of being tough-minded: prosecutors, CIA operatives, Marine pilots. And these are the types of candidates in some of these districts that the Democrats have put up against very conservative candidates. One more area I'd look at is the Georgia 6th. And again, some of your viewers might know this district because there's a special election with this fellow named John Ossoff, who lost to Karen Handel in the special election. Again, it's a district that went big for Trump, conservative district, but it's a suburb. And a lot of women in this district are both engaged and enraged. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I'll be looking at that district as well.
You mentioned women and their influence in this election. Yep. What about the young people, the millennials? They were energized by Parkland, by the Parkland massacre in Florida. And from what we're hearing on the news, at least, there's a significant turnout of young people, 18-year-olds, 20-year-olds, who normally don't vote. A lot of young people don't vote until their mid-20s. What are you thinking about that?
I think there's a good possibility they'll come out. Political scientists like myself are skeptical sometimes. We'd love to see more youth turnout, but we're always skeptical because midterms, they just disappear. Now, for the Democrats, youth are part of that Obama coalition. If they turn out, they are really going to do well in some of these districts. There's signs that they're voting early. There's been a lot of mobilization efforts. The other part of the Obama coalition is minority voters, and that's going to be a test to see if they're, again, not always, especially Latinos, not always present in midterms. But to the degree that that coalition gets put together in this election, there seems to be some enthusiasm. You're going to see this could be a big blue wave.
And what about Beto
O'Rourke? Yeah.
Yes. Is he going to pull that one out? 38. Let me think about this. 3.8 million votes cast prior to Election Day through early voting.
It's frankly amazing. They've had more early voting than they've had in any type of voting in the state of Texas. That's a sign that there's enthusiasm up and down the board. Now, some of those voters would have voted before, but I also think it's a mark of very high turnout. And I don't know how the ballots break down in terms of Democrats, Republicans going in. O'Rourke is the beneficiary of tremendous enthusiasm among progressives, and also a souring on Ted Cruz, their current senator. Mm-hmm. But he has a very, very tough road to hoe. I think he has a possibility, but his odds are not great, simply because of the voting patterns in that state. Still very conservative state. Latinos are a large portion and growing portion. Again, they don't have high turnout, especially in midterms. He speaks Spanish. He connects with them well, but it's going to be difficult. And it's not clear that they've been reached. I mean, it's a huge state, and it's not clear to me that they've been reached on Spanish television and other forums like that. But it could happen. Republicans aren't betting on it, though.
Okay. But early voting is becoming a major national tool for increasing turnout. We did that. We've passed that law 2 elections ago. This is the second election, excuse me, the second election that we're using early voting in Massachusetts. And the trend, the number of people who came last time early voting versus this time, it's a huge increase. People like early voting. It'll be interesting to hear from political scientists what they think the impact of early voting is going to be on increasing voter participation over time. One more subject, because I think we're going to be running out of time for this segment in a minute. So if the U.S. House of Representatives flips Democratic control, what does it mean for this district, especially because we have Mr. McGovern, our own senator, our own representative, U.S. representative who represents Amherst, and the next district over is Richie Neal, who represents another big part of Western Massachusetts. What's it going to mean for Massachusetts delegation if it flips Democratic, and what's it going to mean for us here in Western Massachusetts with those two very powerful people?
Yeah, this portends very well for Massachusetts. The state always punches above its weight because it has politicians who are seasoned, who've been there a long time, who are close to the leadership, and just frankly, good policymakers. And we have that in, I think, in McGovern and in Richie Neal. So they are both going to be taking over as majority leaders of very powerful, Richard Neal will be taking over as a very powerful leader of Ways and Means, and McGovern is highly ranked as well. So that is going to mean more power and influence for the voters of Western Massachusetts. So a victory for the Democrats is good news for this part of the state.
Very good. Well, I've just been given the signal that we actually have a little more time, so I'd like to raise a couple of other subjects with you. I'd like to talk a little bit about voter suppression. So we're hearing lots of reports. We're hearing reports on both ends. We're hearing reports about voter suppression. We're also hearing reports about intervention and interference by foreign powers in our election system. So as a political scientist, I'd really like to hear your thoughts a little bit about these two issues, and whether you think that they're being overblown, and whether there are protections that we could put in place, both to protect people's right to vote and with regard to voter suppression.
Yes, I don't think they're being overblown. These are serious issues, and on the case of voter suppression, we should be making it easier. Political scientists across the board think we should be making it easier for voters to vote. There was a commission that the president set up for investigating voter fraud, led coincidentally by the person who's running for governor of Kansas. And that commission actually disbanded because there was disagreement. There was no evidence of voter fraud. I cannot think of a single political science research prod that says that's a big problem. The problem, however, is the difficulties we've erected to let voters vote. And one example in the state of Georgia, it's unbelievable to me that this is happening. The current candidate for governor is also the Secretary of State, and he's making it difficult by saying we're taking voters off the rolls who don't perfectly match their name to their voter file.
Yeah, I heard if the period was missing after your middle initial, you were disqualified from voting.
Right.
How absurd is that?
Yeah, so it is absurd, and I think there are many groups on the ground that are going to be challenging any of this when voters show up at the polls. So there's a lot of volunteer legal advisors there. And there are other states where it's been hard for people who have been former felons to get re-registered to vote. There's been instances, even long lines as a form of poll tax, because you wait online 3, 4, 5 hours. That's costing you time at your job, child care, things like that. We need to do a much better job of letting people get to the polls. And that's why early voting is good. It's making it more convenient for people to get to the polls. Massachusetts
and that's
is doing
why
it
presumably so many people are doing it, because they can squeeze it in at a time when they actually have some time and don't have to take it away from something else that they were focused on. What about the concerns that are being raised about interference? We hear about what happened allegedly in relation to the election last time with the Russians interfering. People are now talking about China. How do you think those are overblown? Do you think those are being exaggerated?
Well, I mean, I don't say these are serious incidents, because we want to have integrity of our elections, not just in our voting booth, but the messages voters get. And now we have foreign people involved in that. A lot of this problem comes with social media. Social media is very good because it brings people into the process, informs them, but it also becomes a tool for people who want to abuse it and do things to undermine our democracy. So Facebook is now, I hear, very involved in trying to do this. It's a very big task to weed out this. It's not as simple as just taking an algorithm and saying, okay, we'll keep out those people. This is something that secretaries of state have to be vigilant about. Congress should be investigating this because our elections are very close, and they could be thrown off by a few votes here and there. So I would take it seriously. We don't want money coming into our elections from foreign entities. We certainly don't want them through this new social media influencing our elections. That's the integrity of our democratic process.
And I know we didn't talk about this before the show, but do you have any observations with regard to how the trends around the congressional races might affect the gubernatorial elections? Because gubernatorial elections are critical for redistricting. Redistricting, of course, determines the districts in which members of Congress are going to run. So there's this intersection between those two. If we see a trend on the Democratic side for the U.S. House, are we likely to see some change in governor's offices that are going to be significant or are we too amorphous at the moment to figure that out?
No, I think the top of the governor's office in most states gets involved in the redistricting process. We're coming up to 2020 when we do the redistricting. The Republicans were able to gerrymander many of these districts in 2010 because they took control of legislatures and many governors' offices. Mm-hmm. So the Democrats have a chance to win back some state legislative seats, capture a few houses. I don't think it's going to be as big as what the Republicans did in 2010, and some governor seats. And by boosting turnout, they're also going to have some spillover effects on some of these congressional races as well. I'll point out one race that's particularly important to the U.S. Senate. The governor who's running in Florida, this guy named Gillum, he's boosting turnout significantly among African Americans. That's good news for the Senate candidate who was not doing so well, Bill Nelson. He's the incumbent. And so that bodes well for the people in that state if they're Democrats.
Terrific. Do you have any intel or any observations about the governor's race in Georgia, which is also a really...
That's a nail-biter. Yeah. That is a big nail-biter.
So you have a Secretary of State who actually governs the elections. Yeah. You have an African-American woman who may be the first African-American woman to be governor in any state, let alone Georgia. And we heard this morning that the voting machines, they didn't have the cords to plug them in to run the electronic machines for voting, which is going to affect the overall vote. And the Secretary of State, who's a candidate for governor, was the chief elections officer for the state.
Yeah, I say this as a nonpartisan. We really should make sure our voting machinery works as well as possible. And in a situation like that, you recuse yourself from being the Secretary of State. You give it to your deputy, and you run for the other office. There's too much conflict of interest. I also heard there were accusations from this Secretary of State who's running for governor that there's been hacking by some Democratic supporters of the voting rolls, and which turned out to be completely false. And those types of things throw voters off. It undermines the legitimacy of the system. It angers voters. These things should be happening in our electoral system. And I say this completely as not as a partisan.
Right, because it can happen in either direction.
Yeah, it can happen in either direction. Yeah.
And it does, but there's no accountability in the system, right, because those false claims get proven too late, and even when they're proven, there's no consequence.
Exactly.
Well, Ray, thank you very much for being here. Do you have a final word or a final observation you'd like to share before our time is up?
Well, it's going to be, as I said, it's going to be a long night, and some people are seeing this as a referendum on the president. That's not all it is, although a lot of people are motivated by that. There are some other issues out there like health care, but this does set the table for 2020 coming down the road. It's not going to predict what's going to happen, but it does set the table for how the parties behave in the aftermath.
Great. Well, I thank you for being here, and I hope you'll be able to hang around a little while so that if you have some updates that you could share with the viewers later in the show, that we could bring you back up. And if not, just hand me some pieces of paper as you head out the door.
Sounds
with
good.
Your words of wisdom. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Tonight's program is sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters, a voice for citizens and a force for change for 80 years in Amherst. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to all, ages 16 years and older. To learn more, please visit our website at www.lwvamherst.org.
Amherst Media's capital campaign is offering individuals, families, and organizations an opportunity to be a permanent fixture on our brick wall of supporters, which will be located in the reception area of our new facility. Your custom brick can have your name, your family, organization, or up to 3 lines of text, and larger sizes are available. Display your support for the ideals and service Amherst Media has provided for over 40 years. For information, options, and pricing, go to amherstmedia.org/bricks. Thank you.
On segment 3 of our coverage for election night here at Amherst Media, sponsored by the League of Women Voters. And our guests in this segment are our town manager, Paul, welcome.
Thank you.
And our outgoing chair of the Select Board, Doug, welcome.
Thank you.
So thank you both for coming in this evening. And so we are going through a really big transition here in town. And the polls are just closing now. And so it's going to be a while before we find out what the results of the election are going to be. But we want to talk a little bit about the past and a little bit about the future. And transitions and change can often be difficult. And as a resident of the community, I know that for more than 30 years, probably approaching 40 years, people have been talking about moving away from representative town government. Of course, most of the communities around us have open town meeting, and we moved away from that many years ago to representative town meeting. Only one other community in Hampshire County, as I recall, shares that model, and that is South Hadley. Otherwise, it's open town meeting. And Northampton, of course, has a mayor and a city council. And so, if I recall correctly, it was 4 tries before a charter was approved by the voters to change our form of government and to move away from the representative town meeting to a town council. And let me say, remind me here, the vote was somewhere around 54 or 55% of the vote.
I think it was
right?
57, maybe.
57%, okay. So, you know, for those of us who've run for office, if you get 54, 55% of the vote, you consider it a serious result. So you even top that in town here by a 57% vote. But the community was quite divided through that whole debate. And now we have to move to the new chapter. So can you talk a little bit, Doug, about your experience and how you're thinking and experiencing sort of shutting down, closing down the old form of government and participating in helping the community move constructively to the next chapter?
Well, one of the things that I actually said it at a I think a retreat we had, but it was probably a month or so after the election, it sort of dawned on me that I would be the last person ever elected to the Select Board in Amherst. And given that my colleagues have supported me as remaining chair, I'll be the last chairperson of the Select Board in Amherst, which is a sort of odd thing to have in some ways. It sort of speaks to the dislocation that is related to this change in form of government. But I think what we've tried to do as a Select Board in the intervening months since the election in March is to try to ease this transition and keep the town moving forward and not have a long gap where things weren't functioning or being done. So we've been focused on continuing and finishing some things that we had been working on before that time, both in things that came to town meeting in the spring and also through our actions over the summer and this fall. Even as recently as a meeting or two ago, we had presentations on the North Common and potential changes to that area, and we had a presentation on some potential plans for downtown recreation changes. And so we're trying to keep those things with a little momentum and a little inertia to move forward and in the public eye, so the public as a whole is still having conversations about that and understanding those things are moving along, and so that there's not a drop-off and a long gap and then suddenly things arise with people feeling as though they hadn't had an opportunity to participate. So we've been trying to do that kind of work to kind of keep things moving as we move into the new form of government. It is, I think, Paul has the difficulty of going from a sort of known to an unknown. And his entire time he's had the same 5 people on select board, so it's been a really steady group that's been with him over that time. And I have to say, my colleagues are phenomenal select board members, and I've been blessed to be on a select board with such a great group of folks. But it's going to be a really different experience with a larger number of people that he's working with and communicating with and operating with, and the roles and responsibilities are a little different. Some things are kind of the same, some things aren't. So I think it's going to be a real challenge to find the right sort of set of precedents to set, an arc of work to go through to be functional and effective right away.
So what do you see on the horizon as we transition with regard to some of these ongoing major issues? I'm thinking about things like, let's just take economic development in the community. So people have said for many years that we want a high quality of life in town. That requires substantial revenue. We have no real industrial base. We have a substantial amount of property in tax-exempt status, either because of the state or educational institutions that are not-for-profit. How do you see this new form of government having an opportunity here that may be a little different, if at all, from how a select board and the town meeting were able to deal with a subject such as economic development?
Well, I think one of the critical pieces in that is how we do our zoning, and how we've had a number of different zoning proposals over the last several years to change and modify zoning to allow for infill development, inclusionary zoning for affordable housing. Lots of different kinds of proposals have come forward to varying levels of success within town meeting. One can hope that with a smaller group, they'll be able to dig in a little deeper on some of those issues and grapple with them in a very detailed way that's difficult for a large group like town meeting to do well. That's not to diminish the capability and the dedication of people in town meeting, but it's hard to do those things. They're very complex. There's a lot of subtlety to it. There are not clear answers about how to go about it. But it is essential, like you said, to have the sort of high quality of life, the number of services we want, the kind of interesting things we want to have going on in our community. There needs to be the revenue sources to support that. State aid has been very flat over the last probably 10 years or more. So we're really on our own, and the tool we have is property tax, which is to my mind, a somewhat poor tool, but it is the tool we have. And so we have to have ways to generate property tax and generate more property tax. And it's unlikely, Amazon's not going to show up and set up, in some corner of town and suddenly pump a bunch of tax dollars into us. So we've got to do some other things that are more subtle, more nuanced, and yet still retain the character. I think that's why the nuance is required. If we can take different approaches. We could change a bunch of zoning and invite a bunch of large industrial groups in, and it would be a much different town if we did that. And
so when you talk about looking at zoning as one of the tools, so right now, if I recall correctly, we have 3 professional research park zones, areas, relatively small amount of land, and so those could be developed, but that may not be enough land mass to produce the kind of result that you might need. So when you talk about zoning, is that one of the things that could be considered, which is identifying other parts of the town where additional land would be made available for certain types of income-generating property?
Right, I think so. We're not going to become, given the retail center that is nearby in Hadley primarily, we're not likely to attract a lot of retail into Amherst in a significant way. It's just too convenient and too close, and it's already established next door. So that's not going to be where we're going to get the economic development in our town. There'll be some, and we should pursue those that we can, but there are other things. We have 2 colleges and university. We have a research university. I think the potentials are there to harness that in a productive way that can be beneficial to us with startups and innovative, less impactful as far as land use and types of use that could be very, very beneficial to us and add a lot of value to the town in subtle ways. But I think absolutely, professional research parks, other things like that, and other ways to encourage those types of spin-off or startup type businesses from the research that goes on in and around our community. And be welcoming to others that want to come from other places. It's not that it has to come necessarily from the university or the colleges, but if you have an environment that's, you get a certain self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. It's like once you kind of create the environment for it, then it creates a self-sustaining aspect to it.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. MIT, as a great example, has basically used the research of faculty and graduate students to generate enormous economic impact not only for the university, but for that area of the state. And we hear about it over and over and over again, and you think about what's going on in Kenmore Square now. So there are opportunities, and those are very green facilities, producing new knowledge and tech transfer into the economy, which is improving people's lives and improves the Massachusetts economy. People get to work. It's a really rich opportunity, and the university is finally reaching a point in its development where it's really poised to do dramatically better in that realm if there's the right cooperation between the university and the town. Which perhaps, Paul, you might want to respond to that. How do you see the change in the town government affecting our town-gown relations and our work together to continue to be both good neighbors and good partners?
Mm-hmm. So I think the council will provide more continuity and more clarity for our relationships with the colleges and the university. I think, just to segue a little bit, that the town has been blessed to have a select board chair Doug Slaughter as being so articulate, but all the members of the select board are really committed, smart. They can argue with each other, but they generally have the best interests of the town at heart. So the town has been really fortunate to have such great leadership. I think that we hope that the council will continue that tradition. I think that if the council does have the same kind of quality of membership that, and we have had a very spirited debate during the election, which I was really happy about, that people were testing their ideas in the general public, and the voters had their say today, and for
that's what elections are for.
That's what they're for, and it's really important for the town to come to a consensus on this. And it won't be just one vote up or down. It'll be a conversation that happens among people that hopefully represent the entire community, and I think that will be very healthy for the town. I think you're right about the university being it's a gigantic economic engine, and if we can pull off we don't need everything that they generate, but we want our share of it. And I think the university knows that that's in our interest and in the university's interest as well, to leverage some of the incredible research that they're doing and to create some jobs. I think one of our economic advantages here is that people are looking for the advantage of living in a community like Amherst. People, if you live in Somerville or Cambridge and you're working in Kendall Square, that's one thing, and there's a lot of vitality there, but at some point you want quality of life, and I think that's where we excel, and that's why a lot of people choose to live in Amherst, and a lot of people who have gone to school here, are always anxious to move back, which is what I did, and I think that there's a lot of people out there who will, we can benefit from their participation in our economy and our community.
And that quality of life that we are discussing depends on a lot of governmental services, a lot of facilities, etc. So we have a capital plan which is fairly expansive at this point. How do you see, and either of you could respond to this, this may be more appropriate for you because it's more political than otherwise. How do we find our way forward with these needs under the current circumstances?
Well, I'll start, Paul. You can jump in at any time. But we've identified sort of 4 large capital projects in the last few years. We've talked about a fire station for over 50 years in the community. There's plenty of folks that have been urgently seeking that need just to get better coverage. I mean, separate from, it's not as much a staffing issue with that as far as that's concerned, but it's more about being able to respond appropriately. We have a long, skinny town, and so having things in the middle of town and the north end of town. If you live in the southern end of town, it's the response times for EMS services, which is more often what happens. We don't have a lot of fires these days. Is difficult in the current circumstance. It's a longer wait time. The library's been participating in the grant process with the state. Our elementary schools are showing their age, and they are at a point where sort of repairing them as is difficult to do. It's very expensive to do. Is it smarter to move in a new direction? For both the libraries and for the schools, I think we're in a place where we need support from the state. We've all paid our taxes to the state, and it goes into those pools of money that get used by other communities. We need to step up and take advantage of our money. And then, of course, you have the let's see, articulating what's the fourth one?
DPW.
Our DPW, which is scattered, quite frankly, right now. I mean, it's in a building that's over 100 years old for the large part. There are other pieces of it around town that doesn't serve us well. That's a branch of our emergency services, and we're not doing our best by them and by our citizens, quite frankly. And so, in addition to that, we have all the other things. We have tremendous needs in our roadways. We have tremendous needs in our recreation facilities. And so all of those things, they didn't suddenly appear. We've made other choices over the years to not spend money on capital and spend more money on operating expenses. And so, those things are kind of coming home. And so we're going to have to make some very difficult choices about what goes first, how we choose to pay for it, how comfortable or uncomfortable we are with potentially making different choices about operating in order to support those capital projects. Those are a very serious set of questions that the council is going to have to deal with pretty soon, because some things are, as the charter likes to say, not admitting of delay. In other words, we can't wait any longer. We've held off a long time, and we really do need to do those.
So if you take those 4 projects and you put them in 2 buckets, one bucket is we're on our own because there's no state grants, and the other bucket is there's state grants.
Right.
So the schools would be the biggest price tag.
Yes.
And there's matching money there. The library's the second biggest price tag, or is the or the fire station?
It's they're similar size, I
Similar
think.
size. But there's money for the library.
Right.
There's no money for the fire station or for the DPW.
Right.
So what's the cost of the DPW and the fire station together?
So we haven't nailed down the exact cost yet, and that's one of the challenges. Probably about $40 million.
For the 2?
Yeah.
And what's the cost on the other side for the school and the library?
Well, it
Ballpark.
depends. It depends what we're talking about.
Yeah, I know, with the school especially.
If we're talking about 2 schools or 1 school,
Yeah.
and things. So the last school was in $34 million range.
Okay,
right?
so
For
that
us,
was
but
34.
68 total.
Right.
So, yeah, but 34 from the town.
Right.
And what about the library?
About $16 million.
16?
Yeah.
So you got about $90 million worth of
Yeah.
capital.
We're close to $100 million, right?
Close to $100 million, okay, time the value of money. So by the time they're designed and constructed, okay, so that's $100 million paid for over 40 years? So it's $2.5 million a year plus interest.
So the good news is, that sounds really daunting to everybody.
Well, but what is the value of that in relation to the total budget now, or
Right. So the
revenue?
good news is we're in a good position for it, because our debt, our past debt is falling off, so we have debt capacity to take it on. We've been squirreling money away and putting money in the bank, so we have some reserves, and we've also been elbowing room out in our capital, in our budget, to be able to take on more debt. So we're in a good position. What has to happen is the prioritization of the projects. We need to know, and the voters have to agree that which one goes first. And the council is going to have a big say in how we want to stage these things, if we want to do them at all. And there has to be a plan, and there has to be a understanding, and that's my mission, to present that to the council early in 2019. So I think once we get that, people will have a better grip on it. I think we have not built a new building in this town in a generation. And typically in a town, you want to build every generation should leave something for the next generation.
Yeah.
There should be. So we haven't built anything since the police station. So we're behind. And so we're sort of paying the cost of that now as we see the problems we're having with our schools and with the condition of the DPW and the fire. So it's time. It's just a matter of how we want to roll it out and the kind of support we can get from the state.
So in these few minutes, we're almost finished with this segment, but to summarize, we basically have a major capital program. We have economic development as an opportunity, which provides revenue, which then helps us with the capital program. And so those 3 things together, are going to be some of the challenges that this new town council is going to face in its very earliest days. But first they have to get organized.
Yes, that's right.
And before they get organized, we have to celebrate the success of our outgoing select board and our incoming town council, which is going to take place
On December 2nd at 1 o'clock at the Amherst Pelham Regional High School. Everyone is invited. It's going to be a real celebration. They'll be followed by a reception in the cafeteria. It's looking to be a really fun event, so I hope everybody will participate.
Right. So everybody in town is invited?
Yes.
And we're looking forward to seeing so many people there that there'd be standing room only.
Yes.
And everybody will have a wonderful time celebrating our transition to the next chapter in our community's life and history.
Yeah.
So thank you both for coming in. I'm told that we're out of time for this segment.
Good.
On the other hand, if you're not in a rush, you can hang around and you might come back up again and we could talk some more. On the other hand, you may be in a rush and ready to go. And so thank you very much for spending some time with us this evening. And Doug, thank you very much for your service. And Paul, good luck to you. You have a very important job helping to navigate with the town council the transformation of our town government to our new future.
Well said. Thank
So
you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Tonight's program is sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters, a voice for citizens and a force for change for 80 years in Amherst. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to all, ages 16 years and older. To learn more, please visit our website at www.lwvamherst.org.
Amherst Media's capital campaign is offering individuals, families, and organizations an opportunity to be a permanent fixture on our brick wall of supporters, which will be located in the reception area of our new facility. Your custom brick can have your name, your family, organization, or up to 3 lines of text, and larger sizes are available. Display your support for the ideals and service Amherst Media has provided for over 40 years. For information, options, and pricing, go to amherstmedia.org/bricks. Thank you.
Results for the town council election, and in just a moment it's going to flash up on the screen so that I can read it to you and you can see it at home. In District 3, there were 4 candidates: George Ryan at 159 votes, Dorothy Pam 118 votes, John Page 131, and Stephen Braun at 56. So the district councilors from District 3 are going to be Dorothy Pam and I'm sorry, that flipped off. These aren't official, but that flipped off a little too fast, so leave it up a little bit longer on the next one. But we do have our winners in that district. And now we're going to have District 4, and the top vote getter was Evan Ross, and the second is Stephen Schreiber. So those are the 2 District 4 councilors, and you can see the results. Jacqueline came in at 226, and David at 132. So we now have, and we now have the tentative results of District 4. These are not final official results, but these are what's being reported to Amherst Media. Could we go back to that other district again, please, and pop that up on the screen again? I know that was unexpected. Okay, so we have George Ryan in District 3, and we have Dorothy Pam, we have John Page at 131. So it's John Page and George Ryan are the unofficial results for District 3. Let's go back to District 4 one more time. It was District 4, correct? I know I'm making this a little more complicated for the folks in the control room. Okay, again, District 4 is the top two vote getters in the unofficial result are Evan Ross and Stephen Schreiber. And I would point out that these four candidates, again unofficial, were 4 of the 13 candidates endorsed by Amherst Forward, which was a local community organization that became very, very active in the contests for our town council seats. We now have District 5, again, not official results, and the top vote getter is Shalini Balmilne. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sorry, she's the second highest, and Darcy Dumont was the top vote getter, followed by Samuel and Paul. So District 5, unofficial results, Darcy and Shalini. Okay, and Shalini was also endorsed by Amherst Forward. As far as I recall, Darcy Dumont was not. And now we have some results on Councillor at Large, and we're going to put that up on the screen. Drum roll, please. Takes a moment in the control booth to make this work. So, okay, the top vote getter was Mandy Jo Haneke, and the second was Alyssa Brewer and Andy Steinberg. Andrew Steinberg was the third highest vote getter. You'll recall that Alyssa and Andy are current select people who are cycling off that board, but have now been unofficial results. If they hold, they will have been elected to the town council along with Mandy Jo Haneke, and Mandy Jo Haneke was the vice chair of the Charter Commission. And again, all 3 of those individuals were endorsed by Amherst Forward. And again, they endorsed 13. They actually, I believe, endorsed 14 candidates, and one chose to have his name withdrawn from the endorsement list. So he was either number 14 or 13. I don't remember which, but in any event, so far the Amherst Forward candidates are doing extremely well and are heading toward a majority on the town council if these results hold up. And now I'm told we're going to take a break.
Tonight's program is sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters, a voice for citizens and a force for change for 80 years in Amherst. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to all, ages 16 years and older. To learn more, please visit our website at www.lwvamherst.org.
Amherst Media's capital campaign is offering individuals, families, and organizations an opportunity to be a permanent fixture on our brick wall of supporters, which will be located in the reception area of our new facility. Your custom brick can have your name, your family, organization, or up to 3 lines of text, and larger sizes are available. Display your support for the ideals and service Amherst Media has provided for over 40 years. For information, options, and pricing, go to amherstmedia.org/bricks. Thank you.
Welcome back to Election Night coverage here, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Amherst, and we're at the studios of Amherst Media, and political science professor Ray LaRaja has come back onto the set because he has something to share.
I have a few things to share. I just want to warn the viewers, it's going to be a long night. You could have time to watch reruns of Game of Thrones at this point. But I will report one historic thing. Ayanna Pressley is the first African-American woman to be she's going to win the race. First African-American woman to represent all of New England, actually, in the U.S. Congress. So
and she's from the Boston area.
Yes.
And she will be replacing Mr. Capuano, who had been a long-serving congressman from Somerville.
Exactly. So that's one race that wasn't in contention, that the Democrats were going to win that. In some other races I've been looking at, there's one race in Virginia where it was held by a Republican candidate, Barbara Comstock, and that has definitively gone to a new candidate, Wexton. It wasn't the race I was looking at so closely because the trends showed she was going to win, but this is an example of how the suburban areas of much of the country are, particularly around the D.C. area, moving in the Democratic column. The other races I mentioned earlier, the Kentucky 6th race that had this fellow by the name of Barr versus Amy McGrath, the Marine fighter pilot. It's too close to call still. He's actually up by about 2.5 percentage points, with more than almost 85% reporting. So that's going to go down to the wire with the Republican leading. In the Virginia 7th, David Brad is leading by about 1 point with about 85% reporting. Although I'll say this, that it's mostly the rural counties that are reported in that district. The area of Richmond closer there is more Democratic, so that race could still flip.
And is that an incumbent who would be unseated? Or
that would be an incumbent, David Bratt. This was the story I told earlier about him, a Tea Party candidate, unseating the majority leader of the Republican Party, and now he's facing off against a CIA operative Democratic first-time candidate. Mm-hmm. So that was one of the races I'm looking. Still not all in, still more to go. A report of, in the Ohio Senate, which was in play. Remember, Ohio went for Trump big time. It's usually a bellwether state. But Sherrod Brown, the Democratic incumbent, looks like he's going to win fairly easily in that race. So, but most of the Senate seats are still not, I'm not able to report those out at this time.
Very good. So maybe in the next 30 minutes or so, we might find some more intel.
There could be.
Very good. Well, thanks for coming back on stage to report what you've heard, and we'll stand by and see if there's more results before the show ends.
Sounds good.
Great. Thank you. And I think we're going to break for a promo, and but no, first we have some more results.
Tonight's program is sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters, a voice for citizens and a force for change for 80 years in Amherst. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to all, ages 16 years and older. To learn more, please visit our website at www.lwvamherst.org.
Amherst Media's capital campaign is offering individuals, families, and organizations an opportunity to be a permanent fixture on our brick wall of supporters, which will be located in the reception area of our new facility. Your custom brick can have your name, your family, organization, or up to 3 lines of text, and larger sizes are available. Display your support for the ideals and service Amherst Media has provided for over 40 years. For information, options, and pricing, go to amherstmedia.org/bricks. Thank you.
Well, welcome back. We just heard a little bit of news from Ray LaRaja, the political science professor at UMass, who's watching the federal races, and we are now back to considering local matters. And for those of you who have been following and watching, the results that I announced earlier are still very unofficial. They're not the official results from Town Hall, but these are reports that have come into the station from people who are collecting votes around town. And so we will interrupt as additional results come in, but please remember that they are unofficial results until they are declared by the town clerk to be the official results. And hopefully we'll know those before we wind up this evening. And so now we have Adrienne Teresi from the Amherst League of Women Voters joining us, and we're going to talk about ballot questions. And so I think first let's talk about the 2 local ballot questions that the voters in Amherst had a chance to weigh in on. And both of them, we should remind the voters and those watching, were non-binding questions. They were put on the ballot by local people to gather a sense of the public's opinion here in Amherst based on those who showed up at the polls and voted. So why don't you tell us what those two questions are and what the League's position was and why the League took a position on those and what convinced them to support or not.
So let me back up a minute because
Okay.
Of the 5 ballot questions, the 2 that you mentioned are the local ones, and so the local ones that you want to start with, Stan, statewide ballot questions are in the province of the League of Women Voters. So the state league doesn't have a specific statement on it, a position on it. But based on the league's state position, the Amherst League indeed was able to support the local non-binding questions.
Okay.
So,
Very good. So these are positions not of the state league, but of the local league, and it's based on the state league's general position and attitude about these two subjects.
absolutely.
Very
Perfect.
good. So why don't you tell us what those two questions were?
So, question 4 was single payer, and it wasn't only Amherst, but this ballot question on single payer, non-binding, as you mentioned, also included 6 Western Mass districts. And so we were among several of them that got together and were able to support single payer. League has long time supported single payer. We've been at your office asking you
Many times.
for your support over the years. So Hampshire 1, 2, and 3, and the 1st Franklin and the 2nd Berkshire all had single payer. You know, the League has a very strong single payer health care group and committee, and now we've come together as a hub, a regional hub, to work on it, which is why this single payer. So let me tell you about question 5. I don't know how much time we have. It's also local non-binding.
We have a few minutes.
Okay,
So-
and this one is very close to my heart because it's on ranked choice voting. And it is an Amherst area non-binding ballot question. We have a plurality, as you well know, electoral system, and ranked choice voting is getting more and more press. It's been in the Times, the Globe. So what it is it's moving from the plurality system where you mark one candidate to a system whereby we're going to rank our candidates by preference. So it seems like a fair system, and the State League has had a position on this. It was called instant runoff voting in 2005, but that has recently been updated. Now, again, because the State League does not come into the local area to say what we can do, it was the League of Amherst that supported this.
Great. And talk for a minute about how rank choice voting fits into the charter debate.
Well, thank you for asking, because the Charter Commission within the charter itself states that within 6 months the town council will be putting together a group to indeed put forth ranked choice voting for the town.
And when they put it forward, will it be before the town council to vote and make the decision, or will it go to the voters by some form of referendum?
I'm not quite certain about that.
Okay. We'll see if we can figure that out before the end of the
I'll
evening.
need
If
to
not,
find out.
we will we'll make sure that that comes up again at another time here in some form or another at one of our future shows.
It's a very
I'm sure
good
there'll
question.
be other shows.
Glad you asked it. We're going to look
yes.
into that.
Yeah, I can envision both. I mean, it's a legislative body,
Yes.
therefore they could make the rule, the law, the
As well as the policy itself.
or the policy itself, and but they could also go to the voters, and the question is whether the charter requires them to go to the voters or not, or whether they could decide to vote on it and send it to the voters for ratification. It'd be interesting to find that out. Very good. So let's go to the statewide
State ones. Well,
questions.
we're lucky to live in this state, aren't we, Stan? Because Massachusetts is one of 16 states that has the types of ballots that we're allowed to put forth, and we've got all 3 types. with the state ballots. So we'll start with the most contentious one.
Okay. Now, if since you put that out there, why don't you describe the three types so that our viewers understand what you mean by the three types?
Okay. I wish I had a little sign here, because I would say, use an example. For instance, ballot question 1 was on the patient-nurse limits.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an example of making and it is supported by the State League. I wanted to get that in.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a good example of making an initiative for a law. All right, and ballot question 2, which was to limit corporate spending, that is a good example of constitutional amendment. And the third type of initiative petition is the ballot question 3. Ballot question 3 is the one on transgender anti-discrimination. And that ballot question, there was a law, as you well know, in 2016 that protected the rights of people, of every gender. And the repeal is what's happening in question 3. So it's
So having described those three
referendum.
types,
Yes.
we're going to interrupt for just a minute and go to some more results, and then
Good.
we'll come back to this discussion about
Fabulous.
the ballot questions. So on the screen, we now have District 1, and there are 4 candidates, and the top vote getter was Sarah Swartz, excuse me, not S-H, S-W, Swartz.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah Swartz. And
That's Kathy
the
Shane.
second highest vote getter was Kathy
Shane.
and followed by Sharon and Nicola. And so Kathy, okay, and very good. So do we have another one? Okay. Here we go, District 3. We had that one before, and the top vote getters there were... Did we lose here? Okay, District 3. So wait a second now.
see those?
So Dorothy Pam is now the top vote getter, and George Ryan. The last time this was up before us, we had John Page, but it's Dorothy Pam and George Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and again, folks, these are unofficial results, which is why we may see some things change as we go through. And now we're going to District 4 again, and let's see if those results are still the same. So the top vote getter is Evan Ross, and the second is Jacqueline Maidana. And that was not the result we had on the last time that was up. So things are shifting, and these are the latest results that have been provided to us by our volunteers. And so now we're going to go back to our conversation with Adrian about the state ballot questions. And you were about to explain that question 3 was a question of whether people approved of a law previously approved by the legislature and signed by the governor, and that had to do with transgender rights.
Yes.
The League's position on that question was?
Well, the League prohibits any kind of discrimination. We support civil rights, and certainly the issue of transgender anti-discrimination, we supported it when it was passed in 2016 as a law, and we believe in keeping people safe in all public areas. So this is a strong yes from the League.
And that was actually the second bill on the subject approved by the legislature. A number of years earlier, the legislature approved a bill that provided transgender individuals with protections that were much more limited. It did not include public accommodation. It included housing and employment. However, our non-discrimination statute has historically also included public accommodation, which means you can't be denied service in a restaurant or to check into a hotel, or in this case, the choice of what public restroom you would use. And so this was actually the second law. The first law did not go on the ballot and was approved by the legislature, and there was no effort to repeal it. This time there was an effort to repeal it, and we'll see before the end of tonight what the voters of Massachusetts decided. And so what was the second ballot question?
The second ballot is the constitutional amendment. It is a commission on limiting election spending and corporate rights, and to curb, if you will, the effects of Citizens United, the 2010 decision versus the FEC. And the support of the League is as follows. Even though the League itself does not support a particular constitutional amendment, if this passes, that we have the right to really look at that, the kind of amendment that's going to be coming out of this commission that's set up, this 15-member commission. So the support here is based on the fact that we will be supporting it, but not necessarily any particular amendment.
And as you point out, this is in response to a U.S. Supreme Court decision, not a state Supreme Court decision or a state statute.
Absolutely.
And we cannot change the federal constitution unilaterally. We can definitely contribute to the discussion and the conversation. And an amendment such as this could be approved in Washington, and then the states could, one at a time, approve it and actually change the U.S. Constitution. But that's not what this seeks to do at this point. It's a commission to study and discuss and educate the public about the issue and what the options are. Is that your understanding of it?
Thank you, yes.
Good.
Great.
An issue, question number one is the nurse staffing ratio. And
it took up the most pages.
And it took up the most pages.
And it is the most dense.
Very controversial issue.
Extremely. So waiting for the way the statewide vote goes on this is going to be very interesting. So we all know, we've read, it's the pros and the cons, the yeses and nos. You've got labor versus management. You've got bedside nurses versus management nurses, and all over the place. The costs are all over the place. So it's a very difficult one. This was the only ballot issue that the League of the State League was unable to take a stand on.
Take a position.
So, and I should have backed up a little bit, Stan, and I'll explain. Let me stay with question one. The reason that the State League was unable to take a stand on this particular question. Our position is an affordable health care system that provides equal access to quality health care for all. Now, the pro side, excuse me, the pro side argued that that it was going to provide, if you had a yes vote, that it would provide indeed quality health care for all. But against it was that it would also then infringe upon access to, by virtue of creating a greater financial cost attached to it. So our statement could really be looked at as supporting both. Therefore, the State League did not take a stand on the issue.
So this issue has been before the Mass legislature for about 20 years, and only one other state has actually embraced this policy, and that was the state of California, and it's been implemented there. The Mass Nurses Association has been trying to get legislation passed in Massachusetts for about 20 years. So this is an excellent example of people using the ballot to relieve, not to relieve pressure, to let off the steam of a particular issue because they can't get it resolved in the legislature. And they had the right to collect signatures, place it before the legislature one more time. If the legislature failed to act, then they got to collect some more signatures and put it on the ballot. And now it's direct democracy in action.
Absolutely.
And I'm told that we have to take a break here, in order to provide some more results. And I'm going to ask you to stand by so we can talk about some more things.
Tonight's program is sponsored by the Amherst League of Women Voters, a voice for citizens and a force for change for 80 years in Amherst. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization that encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Membership is open to all, ages 16 years and older. To learn more, please visit our website at www.lwvamherst.org.
Amherst Media's capital campaign is offering individuals, families, and organizations an opportunity to be a permanent fixture on our brick wall of supporters, which will be located in the reception area of our new facility. Your custom brick can have your name, your family, organization, or up to 3 lines of text, and larger sizes are available. Display your support for the ideals and service Amherst Media has provided for over 40 years. For information, options, and pricing, go to amherstmedia.org/bricks. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going to share with you all of the results that we have as of this time. And again, reinforcing that these are not official results. And we have all but one precinct with some data. And we're going to have to wrap up our show right after this. So let's run through one more time and let's see whether we still have the same results as were read up before. So our 3 at-large counselors appear to be Mandy Jo, then Alyssa Brewer, and Andy Steinberg. So those 3 still seem to be holding as the counselors at large as of this moment. And now we're going to go to District 1, I believe. And while we wait, here we go, District 1. So we still have Sarah Swartz and Kathy Shane, Kathy Shane, are still District 1 as of this moment. District 2. District 2, our 2 counselors there are Lynn Griesmer and Patricia DeAngelis. Lynn Griesmer and Patricia DeAngelis. Okay, and now we're going to District 3, we hope. Here we go, and we still have Dorothy Pam and George Ryan as of this moment. Again, these are all unofficial results. Stay tuned. Watch the newspaper tomorrow for the finals. And we're going to District 4, and Evan Ross is the top vote getter, followed by Jacqueline Medina. And now we have District 5. And District 5, the top vote getter is Darcy Dumont, followed by Shalini Bal-Milne. So those appear to be our unofficial results as of this time. And again, you'll have to check online or read the newspaper tomorrow to see the actual final results and also the results of the ballot questions. So we've run out of time, and so we're going to have to end tonight's show. There's so much more to talk about, and we hope that we can have additional programs further on with League of Women Voters and Amherst Media continuing to work together, because there's a lot more to talk about, and we hope you'll all stay engaged and follow the good work of both of these terrific local organizations. Thanks for joining us.